The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner as it struggled to cool the warm air. Jessica stood in the center of the room, her hands trembling at her sides. The letters on the table in front of her were more than just words. They were the remnants of a betrayal too deep to even begin to understand. The world outside the window seemed so far away, almost unreachable, as the weight of what she had just learned settled deep into her chest. She hadn't been prepared for this. She hadn't been prepared for any of it. Her heart pounded in her ears, and the sharp sting of tears threatened to overwhelm her. The truth had finally been laid bare in front of her. She had no idea how long she had been standing there frozen, staring at the small stack of papers before her. Her body felt numb, as if it didn't belong to her anymore. The door creaked open behind her, and she turned instinctively, her heart skipping a beat. A man stepped inside the room, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. David was the last person she wanted to see right now, but here he was, standing in the doorway looking like nothing had changed. His usual confident posture betrayed none of the panic she felt boiling inside her. She could hardly believe he was still standing there like nothing had happened. Jessica had said her name as though nothing in the world had changed between them. What's going on? Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. How could she even begin to speak when everything she had believed in crumbled before her eyes? The man she had loved for years was the same man who had broken her heart. The trust she had placed in him was now a lie, a fragile lie that she would never be able to put back together again. David stepped closer, but Jessica didn't move. She was rooted to the spot as though some invisible force was holding her in. Plessy reached out as if to comfort her, but paused when he saw the look in her eyes. That look told him everything he needed to know. "You saw them, didn't you?" His voice faltered for a brief moment before he quickly regained his composure. "The letters, I mean. You read them." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "You think I wouldn't see them, David? You think I wouldn't find out?" David's face darkened as he stepped back for the first time, appearing uncertain. "I never wanted you to know. I didn't want to hurt you. But you needed to understand what was happening." It wasn't like you think. The words felt hollow to Jessica. They were the same tired excuses she had heard so many times before. Every time she confronted him about his late nights or his evasive answers, he had given her something small to make her believe that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing had ever been fine. And now she had proof. "What do you want me to say, David?" Her voice trembled, but she fought to keep it steady. "That you were right, that I was wrong for doubting you all these years, that I should have trusted you when you lied to me every single time you walked out that door." David opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jessica could see the conflict in his eyes, but she didn't care anymore. All the emotions she had bottled up for months began to pour out at once. She couldn't stop them even if she tried. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak, they all surged within her like a tidal wave crashing over the rocky shore. "I just wanted to know the truth," she said through gritted teeth. "I wanted to trust you. I wanted to believe in us, but now I see what's been happening behind my back, and I don't even recognize you anymore." David's face twisted in guilt, but it was too late. There was no fixing this now. The damage had been done. "I never wanted it to end like this," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." Jessica didn't respond. She couldn't. The pain was too much. Every word he spoke felt like a dagger sinking deeper into her soul. But in that moment she realized something so simple and yet so powerful. She didn't need to hear his apologies. She didn't need him to explain himself. All she needed was the courage to let go, to move on. She took a deep breath and stepped back from the table, away from the letters, away from the man who had once been everything to her. But then, something unexpected happened. She didn't know what came over her, but it felt as if something inside her snapped, something primal, something that could no longer be contained. She turned toward him, her eyes locking onto his with a new intensity. "Can I hug you?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. David stared at her in shock. For a moment, he looked as though he didn't understand what she had just said. It wasn't the response he expected. It wasn't the anger, the accusations, or the bitterness he had braced himself for. Instead, she was asking for something simple, something human. For the first time, David didn't know how to respond. His entire body went rigid, and he stood there frozen. But Jessica didn't move either. She didn't know why she had asked him for a hug. Was it to comfort him, to comfort herself? Was it to find some closure in a moment of emotional chaos? She didn't know. All she knew was that in this strange moment, She needed something to hold on to, something familiar. The seconds stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. David's silence filled the room until it felt like it was suffocating her. And just when she thought he would walk away, just when she thought he would refuse her, he stepped closer. His arms hesitated at his sides for a moment before they slowly extended toward her. His hands lightly touched her back and then pulled her into an embrace. The hug was awkward at first, stiff, almost as if neither of them knew what to do with the moment. But slowly, something shifted. It wasn't a moment of reconciliation. It wasn't a moment of forgiveness. But it was a moment that would change everything. As they held each other, something in the air seemed to change. It wasn't just the hug, it was the recognition of something deeper, something neither of them could put into words. Jessica could feel the weight of everything they had been through and everything they still had to face, and for a moment she allowed herself to sink into it. She closed her eyes, letting the emotions rush through her. But then she felt something strange against her side, something that didn't belong. Her eyes snapped open, and she pulled away from him instantly. What she saw left her breathless. The room felt colder as Jessica pulled away from David, her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, she stood there, completely still, trying to process what had just happened. The hug hadn't been what she expected. It hadn't brought the closure she thought it would. Instead, it had left a bitter taste in her mouth, as if it had somehow deepened the wound inside her. David, too, seemed unsure of what had just transpired. His hands were still slightly raised, as if he were unsure whether to pull her back into his embrace or to let her go completely. The awkwardness between them hung thick in the air. The silence stretched on, almost unbearable, as neither of them spoke. Jessica's mind raced as she stared at him, the man who had once been her world, now nothing more than a stranger standing before her. Her gaze flicked back to the pile of letters on the table. It was impossible to ignore them now. The truth had already been revealed, and there was no going back. The lies, the secrecy, it all hung in the air like an unspoken confession, one that neither of them had yet fully acknowledged. Jessica didn't know whether she was angry, sad, or numb, perhaps all of those emotions at once. "David," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she found it within herself to speak. "What was that just now? Was that your way of apologizing for everything? Or was it just another one of your games?" David looked up at her, his expression shifting to one of uncertainty, as if he had no idea how to respond. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know what you want me to say, Jessica. You found the letters. You saw what I've been hiding from you. What else is there to say?" Jessica felt her anger flare at his words. "What else is there to say? Are you serious right now? David, you've been lying to me for months, and all you have to say is that you've been playing me for a fool, and now you think a hug fixes everything. You think it just goes away because you said you didn't mean to hurt me." David's face flushed with a mix of guilt and frustration. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jess. I didn't." He started himself, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. "I didn't know how to tell you the truth. Every time I thought about it, I couldn't bring myself to say it. It wasn't just you I was hiding from. It was me too." Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "So you thought keeping me in the dark was the right choice? You thought lying to me was better than telling me the truth? You don't get to say that after everything, David. You don't get to pretend this is just some misunderstanding. You've shattered everything we had, and you think a hug is enough to fix it." David took a step forward, but Jessica held up a hand to stop him. She wasn't ready to let him get closer, not yet. Not when everything inside her was screaming for answers. "Why, David? Why did you do it? You know how much I trusted you, how much I gave up for us. And you," she paused, her voice breaking as the emotions welled up again. "You threw it all away." David's face softened, his eyes glistening with regret. I know, and I can't undo it. I can't fix it. But please, Jessica, understand. There were things going on, things I couldn't explain. There were people involved, and it wasn't just me. It was bigger than that." Confused by his words. "Bigger than that? What does that even mean? Are you telling me there's more to this? More than just your betrayal? Are you saying there are other people involved?" David's silence was all the answer she needed. The look in his eyes confirmed that he wasn't ready to reveal the full truth. He was still holding something back, something he was too afraid to admit. Jessica's pulse quickened as the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. There was more. He wasn't being completely honest with her. Who else? David. Her voice was sharp now, cutting through the tension that hung between them. Who else is involved in this? I deserve to know. You can't just throw me breadcrumbs and expect me to be okay with it. David opened his mouth but hesitated. He was struggling. She could see it. The man she had once trusted, the one she had given everything to, was now hiding behind a wall of fear and guilt. He had no idea how to fix this. He couldn't even explain it. He had no answers to offer, only more lies. I can't, Jess. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. There are things that are bigger than both of us. Things you don't understand. The words sent a chill down her spine. What could be bigger than this? What was David hiding that was so dangerous, so important, that he couldn't share it with her? Then tell me this, David, she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. Why the hell should I trust you anymore? After everything, why would I trust anything you say? David's eyes dropped to the floor, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Because I love you, Jess. I've always loved you. I'm sorry for everything, but I never wanted to hurt you. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that everything he said was true, but the truth was right in front of her, staring her in the face. The betrayal, the lies, the secrets, they all pointed to one undeniable fact. David had failed her, and no matter how much he claimed to love her, it couldn't undo what had been done. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. David stepped back, his expression pained, and for a moment, the man who had once been so certain of everything seemed utterly lost. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm asking for a chance to explain. Please, Jess, just give me one chance to make it right. The room was heavy with silence. Jessica stared at him, her heart aching as she thought about the years they had spent together, the dreams they had shared, the life they had built. How could it all have been a lie? How could everything she had believed in crumble so easily? But then, as she looked at him, she felt something shift, a small glimmer of doubt, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way out. Maybe this wasn't the end of them. Maybe there was more to this story than she knew. But before she could speak, before she could decide what to do next, the door opened again, and a voice called out from the hallway. It was a voice Jessica had never expected to hear. The door creaked open, and Jessica's breath caught in her throat as a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was Sarah, David's ex-girlfriend, the one person who had haunted Jessica's thoughts for months, the one person who had always seemed to lurk in the background, casting a shadow over their relationship. Jessica's heart raced, her thoughts spinning as she looked at the woman standing before her. Sarah's eyes were wide with shock as she glanced between Jessica and David. She seemed surprised to find herself in the middle of this emotional battlefield. But there was something else in her gaze, something that told Jessica that Sarah knew more than she was letting on. Sarah, David's voice was soft but filled with an undeniable tension. What are you doing here? Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, her body tense, as if she were weighing her options. Her blonde hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her expression was unreadable. Jessica couldn't tell whether she was here to make things worse, or whether she was about to offer some kind of explanation. Either way, Jessica didn't trust her, not after everything. I didn't mean to interrupt, Sarah said, her voice shaky, but she stepped inside the room anyway. Her gaze flickered to the pile of letters on the table, and for a brief moment, Jessica saw a flash of guilt in her eyes. I need to talk to David, Sarah continued, her tone barely above a whisper. It's important. Jessica's mind was racing. What was going on here? Was this all just part of some twisted game? What did Sarah have to do with David's lies? Was she here to defend him? To explain away everything that had happened? David stood silently, staring at Sarah, his face pale. For a moment, it seemed as though he was trying to decide whether to speak or to just let the silence stretch on. Finally, he took a step back and gestured toward the chair at the far end of the room. Sit down, Sarah. We need to talk, he said, his voice tired, his eyes filled with something Jessica couldn't quite place. Jessica felt a wave of nausea rise in her chest as she watched Sarah walk past her and sit down. She was a part of this. Wasn't she part of the mess that had been created? Part of the tangled web of lies that had consumed Jessica's world? And now, Here she was, in the middle of the storm, waiting for some kind of explanation. But before Jessica could say anything, Sarah spoke, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said, her eyes focused on the ground, as though she couldn't bring herself to meet Jessica's gaze. "But I need you to know something I've never told you." Jessica's mind raced. What could Sarah possibly have to say to her that would make any of this make sense? How could anything that Sarah said now change the fact that David had betrayed her? "I never wanted to hurt you," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But David and we had something once, something real. And when I left, I thought I was leaving him behind for good. But then, everything changed. I came back, and I found myself caught in the middle of something I never expected." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. What was she saying? Was she confessing something, or was she trying to make excuses for her actions? David shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting back and forth between Jessica and Sarah. He seemed unable to sit still, his hands shaking slightly as he ran them through his hair. "Sarah, stop. Just stop," he said, his voice a little too harsh, a little too frantic. "We don't have time for this, not right now." But Sarah didn't stop. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as she looked at David with a mixture of guilt and determination. "No, David, I have to say this. I have to tell her the truth, because it's not just you who's been hiding things. I have a part in all of this too." Jessica's head spun. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was it, wasn't it? The moment when everything came to light, the moment when everything would finally make sense, or maybe it would only get worse. She couldn't decide whether she wanted to hear what Sarah had to say, or if she wanted to run far away from this nightmare. David's face turned pale as Sarah's words sank in. His eyes shifted to Jessica, his expression filled with regret, as if he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. But instead of speaking, he remained silent, his lips pressed together tightly, as though he were waiting for something. "I was pregnant," Sarah said, her voice breaking the silence like a bomb going off. "I was pregnant with David's child when I left, and I didn't know how to tell him. I didn't know how to tell anyone, so I left without saying a word. I thought it would be easier that way." Jessica's heart stopped. The words didn't make sense. How could this be happening? How could she have been living with this lie for so long without knowing? David's face crumpled with guilt as he looked at Sarah, his eyes wide with shock. "What are you saying, Sarah? You never told me you were pregnant. You never said anything about it." "I know," Sarah said, her voice full of shame. "I should have told you, David, but I was scared. I didn't think you'd want the responsibility, and I didn't know how to be a mother, not after everything that had happened between us. So, I left." Jessica couldn't breathe. She couldn't process the words that were coming out of Sarah's mouth. The truth was slowly coming to the surface, layer by layer, and with every word, Jessica felt her world crumble even further. There was no way to undo the damage, no way to make this right. David stood up abruptly, his hands trembling as he looked at Jessica. "Jess, please, let me explain. I never knew she was pregnant. I swear to you, I didn't know." But Jessica wasn't listening. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of everything. She couldn't think straight. She couldn't make sense of the web of lies that had entangled her life. She had trusted David, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. "Why didn't you tell me, David?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, filled with the weight of everything she had just learned. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" David's face twisted with guilt. But there was no answer he could give that would make things right. The damage had been done, and no amount of apologies or explanations could ever fix the hurt inside Jessica. She had been betrayed, not just by David, but by the woman who had stood in front of her with the truth. It was far too late to change anything. "I didn't know how to tell you," David said quietly, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how to explain everything, but it was too late for explanations. The truth had come out, but it had done nothing to heal the wounds that were now festering in Jessica's heart, and the question that haunted her now was simple. What came next? The air felt thick with tension as Jessica stood motionless, the weight of everything crashing down on her. The room had become suffocating, the silence too loud. David was standing, just a few feet away, his eyes locked on hers, but it was as though they were both in different worlds now. Sarah's revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud, darkening everything. The truth she had uncovered about David, about Sarah, had taken root in her mind and refused to let go. The betrayal was no longer just about lies and secrets. It was about something far deeper, something far more dangerous. And now, standing in front of her, was a man who had been everything to her, yet nothing at all. Jessica's pulse was erratic, her thoughts swirling around in circles that led nowhere. She could hear the soft shuffle of Sarah's feet as she shifted in the chair but couldn't bring herself to look at her. Every word Sarah had spoken felt like a blow to her chest. But it wasn't just that. It was the betrayal that came from David, the one person who was supposed to protect her, to be her partner in life. He had failed her. And Sarah, standing there, revealing the truth so casually, had somehow become a part of it too. "Do you think I can just forget this?" Jessica's voice broke the silence, each word heavy with pain. "Do you think I can just forgive you both and move on like nothing happened?" David's face twisted in anguish, his eyes flickering with remorse. But there was no denying the cold truth anymore. No more excuses, no more pretending that everything was fine. He had deceived her, and Sarah's confession had only made it worse. "I never meant for this to happen. Jess, I never wanted you to find out like this," David said, his voice strained. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, believe me when I say I was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect myself too." Jessica laughed bitterly, a sound that sent a shiver through the room. "Protect me, by lying to me, by keeping me in the dark about everything. You call that protection, David?" Sarah shifted in her seat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She opened her mouth to speak, but Jessica cut her off before she could say anything. "Don't, just don't. I don't want to hear it from you. You've been part of this too. And don't think you can just walk in here and pretend to be innocent. You knew about everything, didn't you?" Sarah's eyes widened slightly, her lips pressing together as she fought to maintain her composure. She didn't answer immediately, but Jessica could see the guilt in her eyes. It was too obvious to ignore. The truth was clear. Sarah had been involved far more than she was letting on, and Jessica wasn't sure whether she should feel angry, or betrayed, or both. David stepped toward Jessica, but she took a step back, keeping her distance. She wasn't ready for him to touch her. Not now. Not when everything was broken beyond repair. "I wasn't protecting you, Jess," David said quietly. "I was protecting myself. I couldn't let you know the truth. I couldn't lose you. But I see now that hiding it only made everything worse." Jessica felt her throat tighten. The tears she had been holding back were now impossible to contain. She wasn't just grieving the lies. She was grieving the person she thought she knew, the person she had given her heart to. She had built a life with David, trusted him with everything she had, and he had shattered it. And now, Sarah was standing in the middle of it all, a reminder of everything that had been wrong with their relationship from the start. "You should have told me the truth," Jessica whispered, her voice breaking. "You should have been honest with me from the beginning. I wouldn't have been hurt like this if you had just told me the truth." David's face twisted in regret. "I was afraid of losing you, afraid of everything falling apart. But that's what happened, isn't it? I lost you anyway." Jessica shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. There were no words left. The truth had been exposed, but it felt like nothing had really changed. Her world was still falling apart around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "I can't do this anymore, David," she said finally, her voice a hollow echo of the woman she had been just hours ago. "I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. I can't keep living a lie." David's eyes widened in shock. "You don't mean that, Jess. We can work through this. We can fix this." But Jessica could see it now. She could see through all the excuses, all the lies. There was no fixing this. There was no going back to what they once had. David had ruined everything, and no amount of apologies could change that. "You're right about one thing," Jessica said, her voice growing stronger. "We can't go back. But that doesn't mean I'm going to keep living like this. You and Sarah, you've both shown me who you really are, and I'm done. I'm done trying to make sense of this, trying to put the pieces together when I know they'll never fit again." David looked like he was about to speak, but Jessica held up a hand, stopping him. "No, David, there's nothing left to say. You've had your chance. Now it's over." With those words, something inside Jessica shifted. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was clarity. She had spent so long holding on to something that wasn't real, something that had been built on lies. And now, she was letting it all go. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it was all too much to carry anymore. "Jessica," David's voice cracked, his eyes filled with something like desperation. "Please, don't leave. Please don't walk away from me." But it was too late. Jessica turned her back on him and began walking toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had already made her decision. It was time to walk away. Time to leave the past behind her. But as her hand touched the door handle, she heard Sarah's voice again, softer this time, filled with something like regret. "Jessica," Sarah said quietly, standing up from her seat. "Please, before you go, there's more. There's something you don't know." Jessica stopped, her hand still on the door handle, her heart skipping a beat. She didn't know if she could take any more, but something in Sarah's voice made her pause, made her turn round to face the woman who had played a part in all of this. "What more could there possibly be, Sarah?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What more could you possibly tell me that would change anything?" Sarah stepped forward, her face pale. "It's about the baby, Jessica. The one I didn't tell David about. It wasn't his." Jessica felt the floor beneath her feet shift. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in on her. What was Sarah saying? What did she mean it wasn't David's? What do you mean?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. She had to know. She had to understand. Sarah's eyes flickered nervously. The baby wasn't David's. It was someone else's, and that someone is involved in all of this. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. The truth, the deeper truth, was still waiting to be uncovered, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. Jessica's heart was beating so loudly in her chest that it was all she could hear. The words Sarah had just spoken echoed in her mind, swirling around in an endless loop. It wasn't David's baby. It was someone else's. That was the last thing she needed to hear. The last thing that could change everything. She turned slowly, her hand still gripping the door handle, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend the new twist in this already twisted mess. Sarah's eyes were wide, almost frantic, as if she too realized the weight of what she had just revealed. The room was heavy, suffocating with all the things unsaid. David, still standing motionless, looked between the two women, his face a mask of confusion and regret. But Jessica could see it now. He wasn't the only one who had been lying. Sarah had been hiding something too. Something that, until now, she had kept from everyone, even David. "You're telling me that the baby wasn't his?" Jessica asked, her voice barely a whisper. She could hardly believe the words as they left her lips. The world she had known, the life she had spent years building with David, was unraveling faster than she could keep up with. Sarah nodded, her expression filled with a mix of guilt and fear. "Yes, it wasn't David's, it was someone else's. And David, he doesn't know. He didn't know. But I thought I should tell you. You deserve to know the truth, Jessica." Jessica's head spun. It was too much. She couldn't process it all. Her whole life had been based on a lie. Everything she had believed in, everything she had trusted, was now being ripped apart piece by piece. "Who's the father, Sarah?" Jessica's voice was shaky, but she needed to know. She needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went. "Who is it?" Sarah's eyes darted nervously to the floor, and for a moment, she said nothing. Jessica felt a knot form in her stomach. She had never seen Sarah look so uneasy, so uncertain. This wasn't the woman who had always seemed confident, the one who had once shared a past with David. This was someone different, someone caught in the web of lies she had woven herself into. "It doesn't matter who the father is, Jessica," Sarah finally said, her voice breaking. "The point is that I was trying to protect everyone. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Not David, not you. But now I see how much I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have never lied to you." Jessica shook her head, her mind still reeling. "You should have told me, yes. You should have been honest with me. But instead, you both lied. You both kept secrets. You and David have both been playing me like I'm some kind of fool." David stepped forward, his voice pleading. "Jessica, please. I never knew about the baby. I swear I didn't. I didn't know anything about it. When Sarah left, she never said a word. I didn't know anything about this until now." Jessica turned to look at him, her gaze cold and unwavering. "And what else, David? What else haven't you told me? What else have you been hiding? Because right now, I can't trust a single word you say." David's face fell, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. But Jessica couldn't bring herself to feel sorry for him. Not now, not after everything. He had betrayed her in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend. And Sarah, standing in the middle of it all, had done nothing but add fuel to the fire. "I don't know what to say anymore. Jessica," David said softly, his voice raw with emotion. "I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could make it right, but I can't. I can't undo the past." Jessica closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to focus. She had to figure out what came next. The truth was out there, but it felt like she was drowning in it. Everything she thought she knew had been a lie. The foundation of her entire life was gone, and now she had to rebuild. But rebuild from what? From the broken pieces that lay scattered on the floor. "What do you want from me, David?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want me to do? Because I don't know how to move forward. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way." David stood there, speechless, as if he was searching for the right words, but couldn't find them. He had no answers. He had no way to fix this, and he knew it. His silence spoke volumes. There was nothing he could do to undo the damage. Sarah, still standing by the table, looked between them, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I really am. I never meant for this to get out of hand. I never wanted to hurt you. But I was caught up in everything. I thought if I kept quiet, if I pretended everything was okay, maybe it would be. But it wasn't okay, Sarah," Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. "None of it was okay. And now it's too late. You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be fine. The damage is done. The trust is gone. And I can't keep living in a lie." Sarah lowered her gaze, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never wanted it to end like this," she said quietly, her voice cracking. "I thought we could all move past it, that everything would be fine. But I see now that I was wrong. I never wanted to be the one to hurt you, Jessica. But I see I've done that. And for that, I'm truly sorry." Jessica felt a mix of emotions flood her chest. Anger, sadness, betrayal, regret. But beneath it all, there was a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about David or Sarah. It wasn't just about the lies they had told her. This was about her, about finding herself in the wreckage of everything she had believed to be true, and figuring out what came next. She turned away from them, walking slowly to the window. The city outside seemed so far away, so distant, like a world she no longer belonged to. She couldn't go back. She couldn't return to the life she had known. But that didn't mean she couldn't move forward. "Jessica," David said, his voice filled with desperation, "please, don't walk away. We can fix this. We can start over." "We can," but Jessica didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to hear his empty promises anymore. She had heard them all before, and they meant nothing now. She had to be strong. She had to take control of her own life again. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done with all of this. I'm done with you, with Sarah, with the lies. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." With one final look at David and Sarah, Jessica walked out of the room, her heart heavy but her resolve clear. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to walk alone. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance to start over. The door slammed shut behind Jessica, the sound echoing in her ears as she stepped into the quiet hallway. She felt the weight of everything on her shoulders: pain, the betrayal, the lies that had consumed her life for far too long. But she didn't look back, not once. There was nothing left for her in that room, nothing left to salvage from the wreckage of her relationship with David and Sarah. The path she had been on had come to a dead end, and now she was forced to find her own way out of the darkness. Jessica stepped outside into the cool night air, the crisp breeze brushing against her skin, a welcome relief from the stifling heat of the apartment. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had made a decision, and it was final. She couldn't keep living in a world of lies, in a world where nothing was as it seemed. She had to take control of her own life again. She had to rebuild from the ground up, no matter how hard it would be. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A message from her best friend. "Lily, you okay?" it read. Jessica smiled, softly, grateful for the one person who had always been there for her, the one person who hadn't betrayed her. She quickly typed a response. "Not really, but I will be." Jessica walked for hours, letting her mind wander as she tried to make sense of everything. She passed familiar streets, familiar places, but none of them felt like home anymore. Home was no longer the place she had shared with David. Home was no longer a place filled with warmth and love. It was a place that had been tainted by betrayal. She had to let go of it, to let go of the life she had known. As the night wore on, Jessica found herself standing in front of a small cafe, one she had frequented many times before. It had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the chaos of her life and find some peace. Tonight, however, it felt different. The lights were dim, the atmosphere quiet, but it felt like the calm before a storm. She walked inside, the bell above the door chiming softly as she entered. The barista, a friendly woman named Emma, smiled at her from behind the counter. "Jessica, it's been a while," Emma said warmly. "What can I get for you?" Jessica forced a smile, grateful for the normalcy of the moment. "Just a black coffee, please." As Emma prepared her drink, Jessica took a seat at her usual spot by the window. She stared out into the night, the world outside moving on without her, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She had changed. The woman who had walked into that apartment earlier that day was no longer the same woman who was sitting in this cafe. She had shed her old skin, her old life, and now she was left to figure out who she was without the man she had once loved. Her mind drifted back to the moment when she had walked away from David, to the final words she had spoken to him. She had been firm, resolute. She had refused to let him back into her life, and part of her still felt relief from that decision. But there was another part of her that ached, a part of her that still wanted to believe in the man she had known, the man who had once been her everything. But she couldn't afford to live in the past anymore. She couldn't afford to let the lies and deceit cloud her future. Emma set the coffee cup down in front of her, interrupting her thoughts. "Here you go," she said kindly. "Anything else?" Jessica shook her head, her fingers curling around the warm cup as she took a sip. The bitter taste of the coffee was oddly comforting. It reminded her that she was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. "I'm sorry, Jessica," Emma said after a moment, sitting down across from her. "I know you've been through a lot, and I just wanted to say that if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Jessica looked up at Emma, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She had been so focused on the mess with David and Sarah that she had forgotten the people who cared about her, the people who hadn't abandoned her. She nodded, grateful for Emma's kindness. "Thank you, I appreciate it." For the first time in what felt like forever, Jessica allowed herself to relax, even if just for a moment. She allowed herself to let go of the burden she had been carrying. She was starting over. The road ahead would be hard, but she would walk it on her own terms. She didn't need David, she didn't need Sarah, and she certainly didn't need their lies. As the days passed, Jessica found herself taking small steps toward healing. She started seeing a therapist, someone who could help her make sense of the emotions she had buried for so long. She reconnected with friends and family, people who reminded her that she wasn't alone in the world. And slowly, she began to reclaim her life. But it wasn't just the big steps that made the difference. It was the small, everyday moments. It was the feeling of the sun on her skin as she went for walks, the sound of her favorite songs filling the air, the taste of good food shared with friends. It was the little things that made her realize that life could still be beautiful, even after everything she had been through. One afternoon, Jessica was sitting in the park, reading a book, when her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name, David. She stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to do. Herself that she was done, that she wouldn't let him back into her life. But part of her still cared. Part of her still wondered if there was any chance of reconciliation. With a shaky breath, Jessica opened the message. "I'm sorry, Jessica," it read. "I know I've messed up, and I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm trying to change. I'll always love you, and I hope one day you can forgive me." Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the message sinking in. She felt a flicker of sadness, but it was different now. It wasn't the heart-wrenching sorrow she had felt before. It wasn't the crushing pain of betrayal. It was just sadness, a sadness for what could have been, for the love that had been lost. But it wasn't the kind of sadness that would pull her back into the past. It was the kind of sadness that meant she was ready to move on. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The message, like everything else, was part of the past. It was part of the old life, the one that no longer existed. Instead, she put her phone down and took a deep breath, looking around at the park, at the world moving around her. It was quiet now, but Jessica knew it wouldn't always be. She had a future to build, and she was ready for it. The road ahead was uncertain, but she would walk it with her head held high, and maybe, just maybe, she would find love again. This time, it would be a love that was built on honesty, trust, and respect, not lies and betrayal. She stood up, closing the book, and took a step forward. The world was waiting for her, and she was finally ready to live